So we are taking few more questions in software engineering, descriptive type questions. So what are dynamic testing tools? Dynamic testing tools. There are two types of testing. We have static testing and dynamic testing. So we have been asked, what are the dynamic testing tools? Explain the function that they must support. So dynamic testing tools, first we have coverage analyzers, that is execution verifiers, coverage analyzers. So a coverage analyzer is the most common and important tool for testing in terms of dynamic testing tools. So it is often relatively simple. One of the most common strategy for testing was declaring the minimum level of coverage, ordinarily expressed as the percentage of the elemental segments that are exercised in aggregate during the testing process. Then we have the output comparators. So these are used in dynamic testing, both single module or you can have multiple module, that is system level varieties, to check that the predicted and actual outputs, they are equal or equivalent. And this is also done during the regression testing, the output comparators. Then we have test data generators. So this is a difficult one, and for the present, the one which no general solution exists. One of the practical difficulties with test data generation of sets of inequalities that represents the condition along a chosen path. So what we are talking about test data generators is automatically generating the test of certain inputs. So the output, if you give the code and can automatically generate the test data, that is the test data generator. This is the another form of dynamic testing tool. Then we have test file generators. So this creates a file of information that is used as the program and does so based on the comments given by the user and from the data description programs data definition section. Test harness system. This is one that is bound around the test object and that permits the easy modification and control of test inputs and the outputs. It provides for online measurement of the coverage values. Then the test archiving systems. So the goal is to keep track of series of tests and to act as the basis for documenting that the tests have been done and that no defect were found during the process. Test archiving systems. So function that dynamic testing tool supports are like this. Input setting, that is selecting the test data that the test objects read when called. Stub processing, that is handling outputs and then selecting inputs when stub is called. And result display, providing the tester with the values that the test object produces so that they can be validated. And the test coverage measurement, that is determining the test effectiveness in terms of the structure of the program. And then test planning, helping the tester to plan tests so they are both efficient and also effective at forcing the discovery of defects. What is reverse engineering? Reverse engineering is a concept or the methodology we employ in the maintenance part of our SDLC. So reverse engineering is trying to find out what has happened earlier with what we have now. So reverse engineering is this process of analyzing software with the view of understanding its design and specification. So you have a code. Now you are trying to backtrack. That means you are trying to find out what was the design and what was the specification, specs. So in reverse engineering, the source code and the executable code, they are the input. It may be a part of a re-engineering process, but may also be used to re-specify a system for re-implementation. So this reverse engineering, this often proceeds. First you perform the re-engineering, but it sometimes worthwhile in its own right. So it builds a program database and generates the information. So program understanding tools like browsers and cross-reference, etc. may also be used in this process of reverse engineering. And design and specification may be reverse engineered too. First of all, serve as input to SRS for program replacement and now to be available to help program maintenance. So actually we are dealing with the aspect of maintenance only. What is structured programming and why it is important? There are two types of programming. Actually, there are various types of programming. One is structural programming, functional programming, object-oriented programming. So structured programming is a term which was coined in late 1960s to mean programming without using go-to statements. So programming using only while loops and if statements as control constructs and designing using a just top-down approach. The adoption of this structured programming was an important milestone in the development of software engineering because it was the first way from an undisciplined approach to actual software development. So structured programming, it also means that programs can be read sequentially and are therefore easy to understand and to inspect. Discuss any two software characteristics. First is software is not manufactured. Let me see one more because I'm going to tell you more of this. So software is not manufactured and software is flexible. And I'll like to add a few more. Software doesn't wear out. Software is, you cannot touch it, you can just feel it, you can observe it. So various quality aspects, which are, many people argue that they are subjective. That is why they call them subjective, because software is, you cannot touch, you can just feel. It's you know that tangible, non-tangible stuff. So let's have two characteristics right now. Software is not manufactured. That means the life of the software is from concept exploration to the retirement of the software product. So it is one-time development effort and continuous maintenance effort in order to keep the system or the software operational. So, however, just making 1,000 copies of software is not an issue and does not involve any cost. Means the cost is very less. In case of hardware product, every product costs us due to the raw material and other processing expenses. So we do not have assembly line in software development. Hence, it is not manufactured in the classical sense. Software is flexible. That means we all know that software flexibility means a program can be developed to do almost anything. Sometimes these characteristics may be the best and may help us to accommodate any kind of change. So if you have a code, say from 6 lines are here, and you can make it to change just for some functionality, you can make it 4 lines. So this is the adaptability feature of the software. You can just code, it is so flexible, doesn't wear out. There are various aspects, software. If you start comparing it with the hardware, the number of differences from the hardware. Differentiate between iterative enhancement model and evolutionary development model. Iterative enhancement model and evolutionary development model. First, we'll start with the iterative enhancement model. So this model has the same phases as the waterfall model. So what is the difference? But we have few restrictions. Generally, the phases occur in the same order as in the classical waterfall model, but this may be conducted in several cycles. Usable product is released and the end of each cycle, at the end of each cycle, with each release providing additional functionality. So iterative means, say if we have these 4 phases of waterfall, you produce a product with a certain functionality F. Then you again perform the same sequence. You produce a product with F plus say X. These are the X number of functionalities you have added. Then again with product F plus say 10X. Okay, so you are adding the functionalities every time. But at the first go, you will have a product which is actually functional with the functionality that is required, but it may be added later on, but it needs to follow the classical sequence of the iterative model, of the waterfall model. Sorry. Evolutionary. So this I was just presenting the diagram. So let me officially tell you formally. So these are RD, implementation, testing, integration, testing, operation. So this is your release 1. Then you again go back to the same phase. Design, implementation, and testing. That is unit testing you do at implementation. Then you perform the integration and system testing. So now requirement is not a phase here. Why? Because requirement is not required. Requirement is already there. You have requirements. So you have taken, say, you have 10 requirements. You have taken 6 and implemented. Now rest 4 is remaining. You take another 2 and implement. Now and only 2 is remaining because 8 you have done. So you add 2 more functionality and then you perform the same sequence. So you have an operational system to be released and to be deployed, installed. Then you have evolutionary development model. This evolutionary development model resembles the iterative enhanced model, previous one. The same phase are defined for the waterfall model, occur here in the cyclic fashion. This model differs from how it differs from iterative enhanced model. It differs from iterative enhancement model in the sense that this does not require a usable product at the end of each cycle. The previous one you require, or there will be an operational working model. And in this case, in evolutionary development model, you would not require a usable product at the end of each cycle. So in evolutionary development, requirements are implemented by category rather than priority. Here we prioritize, say, We take first priority, then this one. But here we have 10 of these, so we categorize it. This is one category, this is second category, this is third category. So we perform the first one, or we try to imbibe these requirements with respect to the categories, and then this one, and then this one. Okay, this is exactly or more, not exactly, but almost similar to the previous one model, but with the categorization, not the prioritization. And also the product, the end product may not be operational. Explain the software lifecycle model that incorporates the risk factor. Risk factor. Now the problem with the traditional software process model is that they don't deal with, or they don't perform that activity of dealing with or understanding the uncertainty, which is always there in every scheme or part of life. And it is true with software project also. So important software projects, they fail because project risk, they were either neglected, or they were oversighted, or they were not carried out, and nobody has prepared, or no one was prepared for any unforeseen circumstances or happenings. Boehm, BB, has recognized this and tried to incorporate the project risk factor into the lifecycle model, and the result was the spiral model. And he presented it in 1986. So each loop in this spiral from x-axis clockwise through this 360 degree represent one phase. One phase is split roughly into 4 sectors of major activity. These are the 4 activities we plan here. So planning is done here. Then we do the risk analysis here. So planning means determining the objectives and alternatives and constraints. Risk analysis means analyzing the alternatives and attempts to identify and resolve the risk involved. And then we have the development, means here we have development, and then the assessment phase, or planning for the next phase. So during the first phase, the planning is performed, that is this part here. Planning is performed, risks are analyzed, and prototypes are built. And customers evaluate this prototype. And during the second phase, a more refined prototype is built, prototype here, built in assessing a new prototype. So by the time third phase begins, risks are known here, and somewhat more traditional development process. The advantage of this model is the wide range of options that accommodate the good features of the outer life cycle models. It becomes equivalent to the another life cycle model, which is appropriate in this situation. It also incorporates the software quality objectives into software development, and the risk analysis and the validation step eliminate the errors in the early phase of the development. List any 3 characteristics of good SRS. SRS is software requirement specification. So we can say the correctness, the non-ambiguity, and ease in understandability. These can be the characteristics. So let us see them. The SRS should be correct, unambiguous, and complete. That means correct means an SRS is correct if and only if every requirement stated therein is one that the software should meet or shall meet. Unambiguous means SRS is unambiguous. That means every requirement stated therein has only one interpretation, not multiple interpretation. A sentence in the SRS should have a unique interpretation. That is why we use formal specification sometimes. Complete means an SRS is complete if and only if it includes all the significant requirements, full labels, and references to all figures and diagrams and definition of all the terms and unit of measure. So SRS contains what? It contains the functional requirement, it contains the non-functional requirement, and the constraints. So in the light of these 3, we need to answer these type of questions. Define product metrics, live variables, and fan-in. Product metrics. It describes the characteristics of the product, such as the size, the complexity, the design features, the performance, the efficiency, the reliability, and the portability. So what about the product? Whatever is related to the product, that comes in the product metrics scenario. Live variables, a variable is live from its first to its last reference within a procedure. What is fan-in? Fan is simply the number of count of the number of other components that can call this component. Okay, this is fan-in, and fan-out is what? How many components this A can call? That is fan-out. How many are calling A? And compare the organic, semi-detached, and embedded COCOMO models or modes. This is a summary of organic, semi-detached, and embedded. So organic, then we have semi-detached, then embedded. So let us see one by one. Then we'll go to the good design aspect. Okay. First is the organic, then we'll go to the semi-detached. Organic, the project size is typically from 2 to 50 KLOC, kilo line of code. Nature of the project is small. We have experienced developers who are familiar to the environment. For example, like Payros, inventory projects. The innovation is very little, deadline is not tight, and the development environment is familiar and in-house. What about the semi-detached? Semi-detached means typically the line of code will be 50 to 300 kilo line of code. And then the nature of the project will be medium size team, very average previous experience on the similar projects. The innovation is medium, deadline is medium, development is medium, and the nature of the product will take an example like the compilers, the database, and the editors, etc. What about the embedded? This is typically over 300 kilo line of code, large project, real-time systems, complex interfaces. The previous experience is less. For example, the ATMs, the air traffic control, etc. And all these are significant, tight, and complex hardware and customer interfaces they may be required. Why is good design important for a product? A good design is key for a successful product because it is a basic building block of the code which I'm going to write. And most of the error occurs in code or coding. But if the coding error is there, that means some fault is there in your design. Almost this many years ago, a Roman architect recorded these attributes for a good design: durability, utility, and charm. So a well-designed system is easy to implement, understandable, and reliable, and allows for smooth evolution. Coupling. Define coupling. Discuss various types of coupling. Coupling is the measure of degree of interdependence between these modules. Type of coupling, there are different types of coupling that are content coupling. This is content coupling, common coupling, control coupling, external and control coupling, stem coupling, and data coupling. The strength of the coupling from the lowest, that is the lowest coupling means you call them to be the best. If your coupling is 0, you said you have the best design. That is not actually possible sometimes. And this is from best to worst. So if you are given two procedures A and B, we can determine or identify a number of ways in which they can be coupled. For example, data coupling. The dependency between module A and B is said to be data coupled if there is dependency which is based on the fact they communicate only by passing of data. So they are passing data. So other than communicating through data, those two modules are independent. A good strategy is to ensure that no module communication contains tram data, only the necessary data is passed. Like student name, address, courses. These are examples of tram data that are unnecessarily communicated between the modules. So just by ensuring that the modules communicate only necessary data, module dependency can be minimized. The stem coupling. Stem coupling occurs between module A and module B, when complete data structure is passed from one module to another. Since not all data making up the structure is usually necessary in communication between these two modules, stem coupling typically involves data. So if one procedure only needs a part of the data structure, calling modules just pass that part, not the complete data structure. Control coupling. Module A and B are said to be control coupled if they communicate by passing control information. So this is usually accomplished by means of say flags that are sent by one module and reacted upon by the dependent module. What about the external coupling? A form of coupling in which a module has a dependency to another module external to the software being developed or to a particular type of hardware. This is basically related to the communication to external tools and devices. Common coupling. With common coupling, module A and module B have shared data. A, B, they have shared data. This is shared data. Global data areas are commonly found in programming languages, and making a change to the common data means tracking back to all the modules which access the data to evaluate the effect of change. So with common coupling, it can be difficult to determine which module is responsible for having set of variables to a particular value. So this is how this works. We have global variables. This is, say you have V1, V2, and you are changing V1 to 0, incrementing V1. V1 is again changed to V2 plus A1. So this is the problem in your common coupling. So content coupling occurs when module A changes data of module B or when the control is passed. Content coupling when module A changes data of module B. Explain the concept of bottom-up and top-down and hybrid design. Bottom-up, top-down and hybrid design. So bottom-up design, this approach leads to a style of design where we decide how to combine these modules to provide the larger one. You combine them to make this. Combine these two to make this. And finally, so to combine those to provide an even larger ones, and so on like this, till we arrive at one big module, which is the whole of the desired program. And since the design progressed from bottom layer upward like this, the method is called the bottom design, and the main argument for this design is that if you start coding a module soon after its design, the chances of recoding is high. But the coded module can be tested and design can be validated sooner than the module when the stub modules have not yet been designed. What about top-down design? Top-down design is the reverse of this. So a top-down design approach starts by identifying major module of the system, then decomposing them into their lower counterpart, lower module, and iterating until the desired levels of details is achieved, or until the maintainability is achieved. So this is stepwise refinement, starting from the abstract design. In each step, the design is refined to more concrete level until we reach a level where no more refinement is needed and the design can be implemented directly. Hybrid design, combination of top-down and pure. This top-down and bottom-up. So pure top-down and pure bottom-up approaches, they are often not practical. Therefore, hybrid approaches which combine these two approaches is often used. So these are a few more questions on your software engineering descriptive type. Thank you so much. Take care.